नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा. So we will do a quick recap of what we saw last time, and I will try to complete this topic quickly, and if time permits, we will take one more topic and discuss. So let's see, it depends on how much uh, we get into discussing this topic. Actually, if there is not much discussion, then we will have time for one more topic. We will see that. So we were discussing why there is so much discussion about the universal form and other such topics like liberation in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is supposed to be an Amala Puran. So uh, we saw last time that how Srimad Bhagavatam is not just for the Paramahamsas. Contrary to the popular opinion that it is only for the Paramahamsas, no, this is not. Because if you see the purpose of Vyasadeva compiling Srimad Bhagavatam, it was for Ajanato Lokasya, for ignorant people of this Kali Yuga. If you see the purpose of Shukadeva Goswami compiling it, he says Samsarinam Karunayaha Purana Guhyam. It was for the Samsaris. When if you see the purpose of Maitreya speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, it was for those people who are suffering due to suffering great distress of material existence. For those people, he spoke Srimad Bhagavatam. In Nani instructing Vyasadeva, he said, "You have given Vedanta Sutras for those who are detached and those who are very intelligent. But what have you given to the attached materialists? You should give Srimad Bhagavatam for them," like that. And further, Narada Muni also says, "Etadyatura chittanam matra sparshicchaya muhuhu bhavasindu plavo drishto haricharyanu varnanam." He says that, for those who are completely tormented by material anxieties, the only way of crossing the ocean of material existence is Haricharya and Varnan, which is the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, Bhagavatam is called Paramahamsa Samhita, no doubt, but not because it is meant only for the Paramahamsas, but for two reasons. One is anyone who takes shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam will actually become a Paramahamsa. And the second reason is only Paramahamsas can perfectly relish Srimad Bhagavatam. The real taste of Srimad Bhagavatam is tasted by the Paramahamsas. We saw the verse from Nectar of Instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami in the 7th verse of Nectar of Instruction says that the name, form, qualities, pastimes of the Supreme Lord are no doubt sweet, but for a person who is afflicted with the jaundice of material ignorance, the same name, form, qualities, pastimes will taste very bitter. But just like a jaundiced person, even though he may taste sweet substances to be bitter, but the very same sweet substances in the form of sugar candy or sugarcane juice, it becomes the medicine for him to cure his disease. So in the same way, Adarad Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta, if the conditioned souls of this material world, with respect, regulation, and regularity, take to the process of Krishna consciousness, then gradually the bitterness goes away, and with the purification of the heart, and when the heart becomes completely purified, and when the heart becomes ready to access the pure devotional mellows, spiritual mellows, then the perfect sweetness of Srimad Bhagavatam can be accessed. So while Paramahamsas can perfectly relish the sweetness, but for the ordinary conditioned soul, the same Bhagavatam becomes a medicine which can cure their material disease. So therefore, it is all the more important for conditioned souls than even Paramahamsas actually. So, like we saw then that how Srimad Bhagavatam in the very second verse says that, there are two kinds of practitioners, two kinds of devotees. One is Kritibihi, another is Sushrushibihi. Kritibihi is an accomplished practitioner who has perfected the practice of bhakti. For him, when he takes shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ishvara Sadhyo Hridya Viruddhate. Immediately the Lord manifests within the heart. We saw the example of Pundarik Vidyanidhi, Mukund Sarkar, like that. But for a sincere practitioner who has some taste for hearing, gradually over a period of time, the Lord manifests within the heart and he takes shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, like that. So, and then we also saw that how Bhagavatam also itself says, it talks about these two effects of purification for sadhakas and, uh, you know, it brings the person closer to Krishna's lotus feet, and this happens for the Paramahamsas, immediately, like that. Punantite Vishaya Vidushitashayam Brajanti Tacharana Saroruhantikam, like that. So in this way, we saw that Bhagavatam is not just meant for Paramahamsas, it is practically the original audience, the intended audience of all these people who spoke Srimad Bhagavatam, all these devotees who spoke Bhagavatam was for conditioned souls of this material world only, right? And then the second reason that we saw why such topics occur in Srimad Bhagavatam is that different people have different qualifications. Not everyone is qualified for pure devotional service. So, there are karma adhikaris, jnana adhikaris, yoga adhikaris, and bhakti adhikaris. There are people qualified for all these various processes. But so because not everyone is qualified for bhakti, now you have to, Bhagavatam uses as bait these various other topics which may interest these other practitioners, but in pulling them in, after baiting them to take up Bhagavatam because there are topics relevant for them, it gives them actually pure devotional service. So for that purpose, also Bhagavatam talks about other topics. And the third reason that we saw was that actually proper understanding of these topics actually leads to purification. We saw from this last verse of second canto, 7th chapter, Mayam Varanayato Amushya Ishwarasya Anumodatah Shrinvata Shraddaya Nityam Mayayatmana Muyati. If one, especially a conditioned soul, if he constantly describes these topics of the Supreme Lord, which he performs in conjunction with the Maya potency, which is the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this material world, then such a person will never be bewildered by Maya. In this context, we discussed Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse, very elaborate, very deep, very hitting purport, where Prabhupada emphasizes that here, according to your qualification, don't imitate advanced souls by jumping directly to the 10th canto topics. The topics in the first 9 cantos very gradually and systematically prepares the heart for receiving the 10th canto topics in the right mood and consciousness. So very long purport, very beautiful purport. I will not go into it, but we had discussed this in detail. So I think this is where we paused last week, that the three reasons that we have discussed, two more reasons to discuss before we wind up this topic and move on to the next topic. But before we start the next two topics, if there are any quick discussion points, comments based on what we have discussed till now, I will pause for a few seconds to see if there are any discussion points. You can please go ahead and speak. Anything anyone would like to share, add? Okay. If there is none, then I will move ahead. Okay. Okay. So then let's move on to the fourth fourth topic or the fourth reason why such topics are there in Srimad Bhagavatam. The fourth reason is that actually an understanding of these topics is a prerequisite to understand the higher topics. It is actually a prerequisite. Okay. So in the second canto, there is a lot of discussion about creation, primary creation. Third canto, there is a lot of discussion about primary creation. Then there is fourth canto, there is a lot of discussion about secondary creation, sarga, visarga. Then in the fifth canto, there is sthanam. There is description of the Vedic cosmology. So there is a lot about this universe, this material universe, and the activities of the Purushavataras. And then there is a elaborate descriptions of the universal form and all that. And then fifth canto ends. Then sixth canto, the topic of Poshanam, how the Lord specifically nourishes the devotees. That topic is going to start. More personal pastimes are going to start now in the sixth canto. I mean, in the sixth canto, not right now, because you are right now in the second canto only. So, in the penultimate verse of the fifth canto, just when Shukadeva Goswami is going to wind up discussing all these creation-related topics, he speaks a verse which is very interesting. I am going to read that verse for you, and we are going to see the purport of that verse. Please hear carefully. There is a lot of things hidden in this verse. Okay. So, I will read the verse. It's a prose verse. Nivritti lakshana marga adau eva vyakyatah. Etavan eva andakosho yas chaturdashada puraneshu vikalpita upagiyate yattad bhagavato narayanasya sakshat mahapurushasya stavishtam rupam atmamaya gunamayam anuvarnitam adritah patati shrunoti shravayati sa upageyam bhagavatah paramatmano agrahyam api shraddha bhakti vishuddha buddhir veda. Srila Shukadeva Goswami says, Adau eva vyakyatah. My dear Parikshit, I have already described Adau eva vyakyatah. When in the beginning, in the second and third cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, I have already described what Nivritti Lakshana Marga, how one can progress on the path of liberation. The second canto, he had discussed this. Third canto, also in Kapil Dev's teachings, he describes the path of liberation. Okay. So he is summarizing till now what all I have discussed. Shukadeva Goswami. The second, because second canto is when Shukadeva Goswami actually starts speaking. So he says, in the second and third cantos, I did discuss about the path of liberation, my dear Parikshit. Then he says, Puraneshu, in the Puranas, Andakosho yaha Chaturdasha Vikalpita. The universe divided into these 14 parts, Upagiyate. It is described, Yattad Bhagavato Narayanasya Sakshad Mahapurushasya Stavishtam Rupam. Stavishtam Rupam. It is described to be the gross body or a material form of the Supreme Lord Narayan. Yattad Bhagavato Narayanasya Stavishtam Rupam. It is considered to be the material form of the Lord. Atmamaya Gunamayam, made of this material Maya. So there is a description of the universal form and the form of the universe, right? Now you hear, now he is going to drop a bombshell here. Hear carefully. He says, Anuvarnitam Adritaha Patati. Adritaha means with great respect and attention. If one reads the description of this external form of the Lord with great faith, or Shrunoti va Shravayati, or if one hears about it or explains to others, then what happens? Shraddha, Bhakti, Vishuddha Buddhihi. Such a person develops faith bhakti, and pure intelligence, which is a prerequisite for what? Saha, such a person who has developed Shraddha, Bhakti, and Vishuddha Buddhi, purified intelligence, by reading these descriptions with faith, hearing these descriptions with faith, explaining these descriptions with faith to others. And in this way, if he develops faith, bhakti, and pure intelligence, then Saha, that person, Veda, he can understand Bhagavatah Paramatmano Upageyam. He will understand the topic of the Supreme Lord, Agrahyam, which is like an Upanishad, very difficult to understand. So he says, actually the topics describing Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, Lord Krishna's pastimes, Lord Varaha's pastimes, they are actually very difficult to understand like an Upanishad. But the descriptions of the universal form, the form of the universe, the activities of the Purushavataras with respect to the creation, they are easy to understand. What was our understanding? These topics, these technical topics are very difficult to understand. And what is easy to understand is the topics, the pastimes of Krishna, right? But in reality, Shukadeva Goswami, the speaker of Bhagavatam, says, actually these topics describing creation, etc., are the activities of the Purushavasaras, or the description of the universal form. These are actually easy to understand. If you understand them, then you will develop faith, the requisite devotion, and the requisite purified intelligence to actually access the real depth of the pastimes performed by the Lord in his Leela Avataras, which, like Upanishad, is very difficult to understand. So he flips the whole paradigm. What did we think was difficult to understand? What did we think was easy to understand? He flips the whole paradigm. So we think that the pastimes of Krishna, Lord Ramachandra, Narasimha are easy to understand. But in reality, they are not very easy to understand because there are various layers, various, there is, you can understand it one can understand it very superficially, or one can understand it very deeply. So we may access very superficially the pastimes, but in reality, for example, we are currently discussing the book Brihad Bhagavatamrita in detail with the commentary of Srila Sanatana Goswami. So these are seemingly simple pastimes of the Supreme Lord, but the kind of insights the Acharyas give, it's mind-boggling actually. It's really mind-boggling. And if you see the creation pastimes, the kind of insights which the Acharyas give is very straightforward. So creation apparently is a very complicated process, but the explanations given by the Acharyas are straightforward. And the activities of Krishna are seemingly very straightforward, very natural, normal conversations with his wife, with his mother, with his father, with his friends, which you don't need purports to understand normal conversations between people, right? But such elaborate insights, it's really mind-boggling. You are wondering, are you even licking the bottle? So the real meaning of what is being described here, we may laugh at it. What is Shukadeva Goswami really indicating here? I mean, is it real? We are finding these descriptions of universal form and this creation and all so, beyond our head. But you are telling this is easy to understand. And Krishna's pastimes are so sweet. You know what? I can keep hearing it throughout the day. So easy, so easily I can assimilate. But that is the illusion. That is the illusion that you think or we think that we can easily understand. But it's just like looking at an ocean which is very calm in the surface. We think that it is maybe some 6 feet, 10 feet deep, just like a swimming pool. But then you go and go and go and you keep going, and then it's like kilometers, deep, and it's very difficult to access. So, and if you read the insights, the 10th canto commentaries of the acharyas, it's literally mind-boggling. Okay. Apparently, a simple statement made by Krishna and pages after pages of commentary explain what is the inner meaning of this. He said, and literally, it's impossible for us to fathom how could one word have such deep import. So, in reality, what we are trying to read in the earlier cantos, which are seemingly very technical, are the easiest. Easiest in the sense not for the intelligence, but it is easy in the sense they are quite straightforward. Quite straightforward, and they actually purify the heart. If we approach these topics in the right consciousness, with the right kind of respect, then we will develop Shraddha, Bhakti, Vishuddha Buddhi. We will develop the right kind of faith, the right kind of devotion, and the right kind of purified intelligence. Because the later sections, there is, the pastimes of Krishna, there is very little the words reveal. There is lot more on the platform of emotions. So unless we learn the language of emotions, the language of rasa, there is very little we can access actually the pastimes of Krishna. Even in the material world, actually, if you see, even in material relationships, there is very little the words reveal when you have very deep relationships. For example, I have been observing my father and mother. So, we sit together and honor prasadam. So I've observed, expressions, verbal expressions, which have no meaning. Say, for example, when my mother is serving prasadam, my father says enough. If you pick up a dictionary and open and find the meaning of the word enough, it says, whatever, synonyms of enough, stop, whatever. But the unspoken communication is enough means serve me one more spoon. Right? So when the relationship is there, when the relationship is there, you learn to access beyond the words. You can access the emotions beyond the words. But when the relationship is not there, we just keep grappling with the words. So, and we don't really get the point actually. We may not really get the point. Like, for example, I will give you some examples when we are discussing the next topic, if we ever get to the next topic, the next seminar, which is about what is the right mode to, currently we are discussing what is the right mode to access the technical sections. The next topic that I have in mind and also was suggested by Amritanand Prabhu was how do we read the Acharya commentaries? How do you accept? what is the right mood to access, approach Bhagavatam, and also the insights and the commentaries, purports given by the acharyas. So, I put few things together, and I thought I could speak on that, but maybe we will touch on these topics, and I will give you some examples of where those are pastimes which are emotionally surcharged and are happening between people who have such emotional connect, like that it is described that lot is communicated without much being communicated actually, or many times words communicate something, but the real message communicated is something totally different. Like you see, like currently we are discussing the first volume, 6th chapter of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where there is conversation. Mother Rohini is literally criticizing Krishna. This absolute criticism of Krishna. And then Balramji speaks, and then there is Padmavati, the wife of Ugrasen, who is literally almost blaspheming the Vrajavasis, calling them as exploiters, abusers, child abuse. And then comes Balramji, who says, who criticizes Krishna as uh, being a cheat and a deceiver. And then suddenly Krishna wakes up and he starts crying. He said, "Wow, yeah, I mean, this happens in the material world also." But then there is so much beyond the words. Sometimes the words are, uh, unless you know the person, you can't even know whether he is what is driving his speech. But when you know the person, even in the material world, you learn when the relationship becomes deeper and deeper, you learn to access the emotions beyond the words, emotions beyond the actions, and you start responding to it and at some point there is without much communication, you can communicate. And this is what happens in Krishna's pastimes. And if you are not on that level, you miss it. So this becomes so explicit in literatures like Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where you look at the insights given by the acharyas and you're wondering, my goodness, where am I and what's happening here? So therefore here, but we don't establish relationship with people overnight. We can't establish relationship with Krishna overnight. And to the extent we establish that relationship, only to that extent we will be able to access the real emotions behind the words spoken and the actions performed. Otherwise, everything would be taken literally. Yeah, of course, it's not that Krishna does not perform anything which has no literal sense. Krishna does perform many activities which has lot of literal sense. But when it comes to Krishna interacting with his own dear affectionate family members, lot is spoken. Sometimes you go to a particular family, sometimes they coin different language also. They have a language which the outsider cannot access actually. You have seen, in our family, like they have some code words with which they speak. Others cannot access it. So lot happens like that in Krishna's past, and because these are his eternal associates, they understand him. So in crying, ecstasy can be conveyed. So unless you understand the language of rasa, all we understand about crying is distress, right? So these pastimes unless we go beyond the 19th chapter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and have some understanding of spiritual mellows, actually to access um, access these pastimes is almost next to impossible. We will be scratching the surface actually. But for the pastimes of Purvataras, there is no need for understanding the signs of spiritual mellows, because the Purushavataras are not interested in establishing a relationship with any Jivatma. The Purushavataras are Paramatma expansions. So they are Upadrashta Anta. That is their only role. They look at what you are intending to do, they check what is your bank balance, and they allow you or not allow you to perform that activity. So, or matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha, right? So they make you forget few things, whatever. So their role does not involve relationship. So therefore, uh, uh, there is a prerequisite of understanding the language of rasa is not a prerequisite for understanding the actions of the Purushavatara. But when it comes to understanding the higher things, so unless we understand, unless we actually establish a relationship with Krishna, then Krishna's language and Krishna's family members' language, we will be understanding it at a different level, and we will not be able to access it. So Shukadeva Goswami is speaking this verse, and we may just skip this verse because we are too eager to start the Ajamil's pastime. Too much of Vedic cosmology, enough. I am just very eager. Just quickly skim through the last few verses of fifth canto, because we just want to meet this personality Ajamil, and we want to meet the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas so that we can hear those conversations, so exciting, not so boring like this description of the universal cosmology. But here is Shukadeva Goswami revealing such an insight that if you access these anuvarnitam adritah patati, if one reads this description with faith, with great respect, shrunoti, if one hears about them with faith and respect, shravayati, if one narrates it to someone with faith and respect, then what one gets? Shraddha, Bhakti, Vishuddha Buddhi, which is a prerequisite to access Sahaveda. Such persons can understand Bhagavatah Paramatmano Upageyam, the higher pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which, like an Upanishad, are very difficult to understand. Right? So, you may be a commerce graduate, okay? You may know the English language, okay? So you may be a commerce graduate, you may know the English language. There may be a PhD level physics book, which is in English language. So just because we know the language does not necessarily mean we will be able to understand the contents of the book. And you may have a commerce book in a different language. It's better, it may be a little bit more easier to little bit learn the other language and read that commerce book, because you know the subject matter better. You can relate to it. Of course, it does involve endeavor, does involve little bit of mm, effort, but it is easy because you at least can relate to the subject matter. Similarly, the creation pastimes, it is easier for us to relate because we live in this real world and it is described in the realm of material energy, material time, which we are very much aware of. But the spiritual pastimes are in the realm of spiritual time and yoga maya, which we don't have access. But it looks very similar. That is there, that's where is the deception. So then so therefore, but if we approach this subject matter, these technical, so-called technical sections with the proper faith and respect, then one can develop Shraddha, Bhakti, Vishuddha Buddhi to understand the higher pastimes, right? So, uh, uh, Srila Prabhupada commenting on this verse, he writes, the Krishna consciousness movement is pushing forward the publication of Srimad Bhagavatam as explained, especially for the understanding of the modern civilized man to awaken him to his original consciousness. Without this consciousness, one melts into complete darkness. Whether one goes to the upper planetary systems or the hellish planetary systems, he simply wastes his time. Therefore, one should hear of the universal position of the Virat form of the Lord as described in Srimad Bhagavatam. That will help one save himself from material conditional life and gradually elevate him to the path of liberation so that he can go back home, back to Godhead. Okay, like that. So, and then also there is a very beautiful commentary which Shile, because in the 10th chapter of the second canto, which is the last chapter, for the third time, universal form is described. Again and again, these descriptions look quite similar. And one might be wondering, why is Bhagavatam being so repetitive? And that too, why repetitively describing a form which is actually an imaginary form? So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti commenting on this, he says that, so someone may ask, so this is the reader's doubt. Okay, what is the reader's doubt? The doubt is that, why do you always speak about the universal form and the self and the Atma? Why is there so little sweet discussion about the qualities and forms of the Leela Avataras? Especially in the early cantos, I am very impatient. This is so boring. Come on, some sweet pastimes. Please describe. So this is natural. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti is empathizing with the bored reader. The reader who is at the verge of losing his interest, for the third time and for the fifth chapter in just 10 chapters out of 10 chapters, for the fifth chapter, he is describing, he's reading about this universal form. And it's so boring actually. So he is addressing the bored reader's concern. So he says, what you observe is true. You're right. He says, to whom should the topics about the Leelavataras be taught with relish? Who is the real recipient of the Leelavataras? Who should access these Leelavatara pastimes with great relish? He says, those who have perfected bhakti or the Nitya Siddhas constantly play spontaneously in the sweet ocean of Lord's beauty and pastimes. But those who are sleeping on the bed of bliss of sense pleasure, and those who have fainted in the waves of suffering arising from karma cannot be woken up. So, which is all of us, right? We are sleeping on the bed of bliss of sense pleasure, and otherwise we have fainted in the waves of suffering arising from karma. So they cannot be woken up. how can the pastimes of the Lord be taught to them? This crest jewel of Puranas, being most merciful, thinking of how to give instruction to make them into sadhaka bhaktas, constantly attempts by some trick or other to wake them up. So it tries to trick them so that they can be woken up. He says, just as a limb burned by fire is given relief by fire, and a person haunted by a ghost is revived by a ghost mantra, in the same way, the jiva's absorption in the sleep of Maya can be broken only by topics concerning Maya. So, which is topics concerning Maya does not mean picking up a newspaper and reading Prajalpa, right? It is talking about how the Lord interacts with Maya and, you know, manifests this material creation, maintains it, destroys it, like that. That's what he's talking about. Then he says, but even though by the shower of nectar or pastimes of the Lord obtained by the mercy of the devotee, the person sleeping in the happiness of Maya or fainting in the suffering of karma wakes up, becomes drenched, revitalized, dances and rejoices blissfully. Only those who obtain that great mercy can become successful and not others. So very few may have access to the um, uh, mercy of the devotee, by the mercy of the devotee, gradually the person sleeping can be woken up, nursed back to proper health, and then he can start relishing those pastimes. But the low jivas, desiring to cross the material world and have developed determination to take shelter of the lotus feet of Guru, can be delivered by constantly hearing about the self. Self means the nature of Atma, the difference between body and soul. How many of you have felt, why is Prabhupada constantly repeating, whatever book, a high topic, low topic, well, the only thing Prabhupada says is, you are not this body, you are the soul. How many of you have felt like that? Right? So, but the point is, this is what Srila Vishwanath Jagadakur says. So, Prabhupada is not repetitive. Even Bhagavatam is repetitive. Right? So, they are low jivas, which means they are severely conditioned, and they are desiring to cross the material world, and they have developed determination to take shelter of the lotus feet of Guru, which is all of us, right? We have understood the importance of taking shelter of a Guru. We are willing to take shelter of a Guru, but at the same time, we are suffering. We are victims of our own conditioning, right? So for such people, these topics are most relevant. These topics are most relevant. For this reason, there is repeated discussion of the self. Those who are faithful devotees of the Lord will relish the nectar of the whole Bhagavatam. Will relish the nectar of the whole Bhagavatam. Right? This scripture does not only speak about Bhagavan, though he is the main topic. He is the Ashraya. He is the Ashraya Tattva. He is the 10th topic. He is the most important topic. But he is not the only topic. Okay. It also speaks about the impersonal aspect of the Lord, the Brahman, and his portion, Paramatma. So the Paramatma is whom? Kshirodakasaya Vishnu, Garbhodaya Vishnu, Karanodakasaya Vishnu, all three are Paramatma Tattvas only. They are all expansions of the Lord. And Maya is his energy. Okay. So a complete understanding of the absolute truth is understanding his expansions, his incarnations, his energies. So without understanding all of that, how can we claim that we have understood that person completely? Right? So if you want to understand Krishna completely, if we don't understand Krishna's expansions and energies, then how is that a complete understanding of Krishna? right? So therefore, he says, it has been said at the beginning of this work, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. You know, the supreme absolute truth is understood in three stages by people with the lowest qualification. They access that absolute truth on the level of Brahman. But when they become spiritually more potent and come closer to the absolute truth, they see not just the Brahman, but they can access the Paramatma feature also, which is actually Bhagavan only. Hmm. So actually Bhagavan only. And Prabhupada gives this example of, the train. From a distance, you see light, right? But when it comes little bit closer, you see a long train, a long object. And when it comes to the platform where you're standing, you see people inside and all that. But it is the same thing. What you saw as light is not different from what you saw as a long object, is not different from what you see right in front of you. It's the same thing. It's just the distance which has diminished your clarity of understanding of that subject matter. Similarly, when someone has very meager devotional credit, uh, they access the absolute truth. They are capable of accessing the absolute truth only um, as the Brahman. Just like a person who is severely myopic, he has severe short-sightedness, -7, -8. And if he is standing 10 feet from the deity form of the Lord, it's not that he will not see anything, but he will see a hazy ball of light. That's all. He will see a hazy ball of light. Similarly, when people are spiritually myopic and they are trying to access the absolute truth, all that they can see is a hazy ball of light, which is Brahman, right? But when they become spiritually more endowed, then they can access the Paramatma. What is the meaning of accessing Paramatma? What is Paramatma realization? Paramatma realization means understanding that the absolute truth can have form. He can have qualities. He can have pastimes also, but only with respect to this material world. So understanding the Paramatma realization means realizing or understanding or accessing the uh, pastimes of the Purushavasaras. That's all. There is no relationship involved there. Understanding spiritual relationships is the topic that is reserved for very advanced devotees. We can try to sort of get some idea, but the more we progress, the more we mature devotionally, only to that extent we will be access those higher topics. The prerequisites for understanding the topics of the Purushavasaras is very minimal. The devotional prerequisite. But the devotional prerequisite for understanding the higher topics are tremendous. You go towards Lord Ram's pastimes, lot. You want to enter into Krishna's pastimes, it's lot more. You want to enter Vrindavan, it's lot more. Actually, Uddhava, when Narada Muni meets Uddhava in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Uddhava wants Narada Muni. They are in Dwaraka and they are discussing. So Uddhava pleads with Narada Muni, my dear Narada, please stop your quest of finding out the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy here, right here in Dwaraka. Don't go further. Don't go to Vrindavan. You will not be able to handle it. You will not be able to handle that roller coaster ride. Yeah, so Just it is sufficient for you to know that they are the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy. But don't go there. Stop your quest here, uh, because you don't know what will happen to you. Uh, like that, he's warning Narada Muni there. So, understanding the Paramatma is actually, it requires very little of additional uh, prerequisites, devotional maturity in comparison to understanding these higher topics. Actually, even though they may sound little technical, that is true, no doubt about it. But uh, but the devotional maturity needed to understand them is minimal. But when one becomes more devotionally matured, then one can understand the Bhagavan feature. Thus, repeated discussion of the self here also refers to Jiva and Paramatma. Jiva and Paramatma, the super soul. So, thus, repeated discussion of the self is suitable for worshippers of Brahman and Paramatma. By this means, being most generous, Bhagavatam produces bhakti in even the worshippers of Brahman and Paramatma. We may not be worshippers of Brahman and Paramatma, but we may have devotional maturity which is not good enough to access the Bhagavan feature completely. We may aspire to understand Bhagavan, but our devotional maturity may be on the level of one who is fit to access only Brahman and Paramatma. That is possible. We may want to wear specs. You know, what is the difference between a sadhak who lacks devotional maturity and a jnana yogi who lacks devotional maturity, or a jnani who lacks devotional maturity? The difference is that a devotee is convinced that, okay, I need to wear spectacles to actually see the proper form of the Lord. Whereas the jnani thinks, what I am seeing is really the form. Both may be seeing the same. Both may be qualified to see the same. But at least one is convinced that this is not the highest, and the other is convinced that this is the highest. What I am seeing is what it is. Right? So such people cannot access. So, so one should not say that, okay, so these discussions of creation is all Paramatma worshippers. It may not be just for the Paramatma worshippers. It may be for devotees who want to understand Bhagavan, but whose devotional maturity is on the level of understanding only the Purushavatara's pastimes. So do it right now. Do this exercise, and then become more qualified. As Shukadeva Goswami says, develop the Shraddha, Bhakti, and Vishuddha Buddhi, and then access the higher pastimes, right? Like that. So then he says, Bhakti even appears in those who have reached perfection in Brahman and Paramatma. This is shown in the verse Atma Ramascha Munayo Nirgranta Pivurukrame Kurvanti Ahaitukim Bhaktim Ittam Bhuta Guno Harihi. You know, there is potential in every living entity to actually become attracted to Krishna. When he is rightly primed up, any living entity can get attracted to Krishna, even the Gyanis, right? So now bhakti can appear in them also. Nrimatrasya adhikarita. Any human being is qualified to practice bhakti. Why not the Gyanis, right? So, but how do you attract them? You have to attract them from where they are and then gradually pull them. So he says, those persons, their sadhana and the result they achieve are not rejected by pure devotees, but looked upon with sympathy. The practice of the jnanis, the practice of the karmis are not rejected by devotees. Because if you are rejecting that sadhana, then we are challenging the intelligence of Krishna, because it is Krishna who has presented these various practices and the various literatures describing those practices to these people. So we think by rejecting them, we think we know better than Krishna. So this is called as the fourth offense to the holy name, which is Shruti Shastra Nindanam, to blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in pursuance of Vedic version. Okay. We may accept only the Bhakti Shastras for our personal practice, but at the same time, we don't reject the other Shastras because we understand that they may not have qualification for Bhakti. So for them, those Shastras are relevant. And even Bhagavatam talks about these other practices in order to attract those people. So we don't reject them, but we look at them with sympathy. So he says, Krishna, who is completely full of sweetness in his form, qualities, and pastimes, and possesses dharma, jnana, bala, and aishwarya, since he contains all the avatars such as Matsya and Kurma, and the aspects of Brahman and Paramatma as well, is worshipped by all types of devotees. So, what is the understanding of Krishna? If you don't understand his qualities, if you don't understand his pastimes, if you don't understand his energies, dharma, jnana, bala, aishwarya, if you don't understand his avatars in the form of Matsya, Kurma, etc., and if you don't understand his various aspects such as Brahman, Paramatma, etc., then it is incomplete understanding of Krishna, right? So therefore, Krishna is complete with all these aspects. So complete understanding of Krishna involves understanding these subject matters also, right? So this scripture, being non-different from Krishna's Swarupa, thus reveals Krishna as the source of all avatars, Brahman and Paramatma. But if I say, he is the source of Mahat Tattva, he says, yes, yes, very good. What is Mahat Tattva? I don't know. So, so how are you appreciating? So, Mahat Tattva will be explained to help you understand how Krishna is the source of that Mahat Tattva. Because a complete understanding of Krishna is, it also includes the understanding that Krishna is the source of Mahat Tattva also. And if you have to understand Krishna is the source of Mahat Tattva, you have to know what is Mahat Tattva. So for that purpose, it is described, right? So then he says, it reveals his qualities, pastimes, sweetness, and powers, the method to attain him, sadhana bhakti, and the goal, which is prema bhakti, as well as principles such as dharma, jnana, yoga, and vairagya. Thus, everything is consistent. Whatever is described in Bhagavatam is consistent. We may not be able to understand how particular things will help us understand, will help us up Krishna Prem. We don't have to understand. The doctor understand how a particular tablet works, right? So, a doctor knows how a small, tiny tablet, when popped in the mouth, can act on the heart and save a person from imminent heart attack. The consumer may not know. He need not know. Uh, but the doctor who is prescribing to the patient, he knows. So we may not know how an understanding of these topics will help us develop Krishna Prem, but Krishna knows. He has designed this literature. So we just have to have faith and move ahead. So therefore, the fourth reason that we discussed today is understanding these topics is actually a prerequisite to understand the higher topics, because it will create the prerequisite of Shraddha, Bhakti, and Vishuddha Buddhi, which is needed to understand the higher topics, which, like Upanishads, are very difficult to understand. So this is the fourth reason why Bhagavatam discusses these topics. And also we saw that, it is consistent because the absolute truth is full with all his energies, incarnations, etc., and his various features as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, etc. So those descriptions and their activities are very much consistent with description of Krishna. So therefore, there is nothing inconsistent in the description of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they have to be approached with faith and respect. Okay, I have spoken for more than an hour now without pausing for any discussion points or questions. But at this point, I will pause to see if there are any quick comments, discussion points. Anyone would like to share something, add or ask? So I will wait.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, bro.
Yeah, so I have few questions. However, before asking this question, if devotees can, because you talked about personal relationship, so they have not either met you or give like few short introduction about themselves. If somebody wishes, they can on their video and then introduce themselves to Prabhuji.
Oh, acha, okay. Yes, sure, bro.
So, Varajaman Prabhu, yeah, you can.
Hare Krishna, Balaram Shakti Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Krishna Prabhupada. Oh, I think I also followed the very similar path like Amritanand Prabhu. Maybe 2 years ago, when the COVID struck, you did a seminar in Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's Madhurya Kadambani in GV. So,
Acha.
So basically, Madhachandra Prabhu recommended me to hear that recording. So, and from then onwards, Prabhu, I have been hearing you, and just to let you know that I am also a good friend of Ashwin Jatani, who was your roommate.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So with that, Prabhu, I would like to. There is nothing about my introduction to just Vajraman Das, and I'm just part of Amritanand Prabhu's class here in Bhagavatam, as well as I also studied under him all the Bhakti Shastri books. So that. Thank you, Amritanand Prabhu.
Thank you, bro.
Anyone else?
Damodar Hari Prabhu has raised his hands. I know Damodar Prabhu Hari.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu, Jai Shila Prabhupada. It's wonderful to see you that you are with the Seattle congregation. It was my heartful desire that sometime we are able to speak, and thanks to Amritan Prabhu, who is our teacher, common teacher. Like he is the one who actually brought me to Krishna consciousness. So, and he continues guiding me. So, you know that no wonder that you are here due to his desire. So, Prabhu, I have a question. He said that Bhagavatam is, even the materialistic can approach the Bhagavatam, right? It will bring him to Paramahansa stage, right? So we say that, like, to approach the Bhagavad Gita, what is the right mood? Okay, you should have the mood of Arjuna, and with that mood you should approach Bhagavad Gita. What is the mood in that case to approach Bhagavatam, right? Any materialistic can approach Bhagavatam, or should there will be some minimum qualification?
Well, one qualification definitely is through the guidance of a devotee. So the role of a devotee can never be understated in any stage of one's progress on the path of devotional service, and this very much includes understanding Srimad Bhagavatam also, and of course if we definitely understand it through the writings of the acharyas, then it becomes through the Bhaktivedanta purports, through the writings of the other acharyas, then one can understand the real purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. But like we in the previous session we actually did discuss a little bit about it, and the next whole theme that I had in mind was actually this, what is the mode of approaching Srimad Bhagavatam and the comments given by the various acharyas, how do we approach them? That is the whole topic that we were going to discuss next, actually.
Okay, Prabhu. So just a follow up to this. So, in ISKCON, right, this is what I have heard, like when I came to ISKCON, that, hey, don't approach Srimad Bhagavatam right now unless you go and finish the Bhagavad Gita. So there is a sequence recommended that first you should do the Bhagavad Gita, then do Srimad Bhagavatam, and then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, like that, right? While we are hearing is that any materialistic can approach it, right? So and I've seen teachers with a different recommendation. Some teachers, they are okay, they said, okay, yeah, you can start Srimad Bhagavatam, that's totally fine. Some teachers are say that no, you should go and seek. What is the right way? Like, so because today also one of my student asked, like, Prabhu, can I go and start Srimad Bhagavatam in parallel? And I was totally fine. I said, go ahead, do that. But on the other hand, I have seen being told, no, you should wait, finish the Bhagavad Gita, then approach Srimad Bhagavatam. So can you talk a little bit about that? What should be the right way to approach this question?
Well, actually, if you approach Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam, then I don't think Bhagavad Gita is really a prerequisite, actually, because Prabhupada sort of in his purports, it's like a wholesome meal. Everything is covered in that. So if you approach Srila Prabhupada Srimad Bhagavatam, then Bhagavad Gita is certainly not a prerequisite. I mean, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, you have to read Srimad Bhagavatam through the eyes after you have sufficiently read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat. So, I mean, because he says that Bhagavatam should be understood through the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like that. So, it is I would say, especially if you're, I didn't, the devotees told me that you have to first read all the small books before you read, the bigger books. But somehow I started with Bhagavad Gita. So I did not read the small books. I don't know how my journey would have panned out if I had first started with the smaller books. I honestly don't know. But personally, I don't really see it's if you are Prabhupada's Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, either one you start with, I think should be fine. That's what I think, and that's my opinion. The opinions may change.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I have another question, but I'll let other devotee go, and then I'll ask it later. Okay, Haribo. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there is in the chat box, I think Arun Lakshmanan Prabhu has asked some questions.
Yeah, Adi Purusha
He says,
Prabhu.
Adi Purush Prabhu. Okay. Okay. He says he is not able to unmute. I think he should be able to unmute, right?
Maybe his unmute button is not working.
Okay, fine. Okay, so I will. He has written down his questions. He says there are two aspects to learning scriptures in my mind. One, to increase our bhakti, and the other is to help others to increase their bhakti via preaching. How should we think about approaching Bhagavatam from these two perspectives? I mean, both can go hand in hand. When we feel nourished, then we can nourish others. So definitely Bhagavatam is a prime source of nourishment for us. So if Bhagavatam can nourish us, Bhagavatam can nourish others also. So definitely one can nourish oneself, and one can. Oh, he says that he's at a place where he cannot talk. Actually, that's why he's not able to unmute. So yeah, definitely it is possible to approach from both ways. But the primary thing is for one's own nourishment, because when one feels nourished, then one can certainly help nourish others also. So that should be the prime approach of approaching Srimad Bhagavatam. Ram Prabhu has raised his hand. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandat Pranam.
Dandat
Jai Shri
Prabhu.
Prabhupada. Yeah,
Jai Prabhupada.
yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for covering this topic of understanding Krishna's pastimes from multiple perspectives, and our acharyas, as you mentioned, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he has given very sweet, different meanings. As you said, there is a storyline, there is a philosophy, and there is internal, external meaning. So, like recently, I have been contemplating on this, and thank you for covering this topic. But I was also thinking about uh, when we hear about this multiple perspective. So, what is a practical application of it? Is it that if similar situation comes in our life, and according to the time, place, and circumstances, not necessarily we will have to use the same answer to answer same answer, like, or same solution to answer that situation, or how to understand what is the practical application? Is it a correct understanding that it is kind of this is exercise for our brain to study the Srimad Bhagavatam and understand the different situations, and so that we can practically apply it in our life? Is that a correct understanding, Prabhu? Or
Well, for most of the pastimes, for almost all the pastimes, the acharyas actually give lessons, what a sadhaka is supposed to learn. So if we scrutinizingly study, study, then we don't have to squeeze our brain. All that we need to do is to spend some time to see they what they want sadhakas like us to understand, because they do mention it in their commentaries. And second thing is, when it is not very clear, there are two things that we can do. One is approach another more devotionally mature devotee and seek guidance, or pray, because Bhagavatam is not different from Krishna. We offer prayers, Bhagavatam responds. So definitely, because many times a particular way in which a particular character in Bhagavatam has responded may not be necessarily an injunction for a sadhaka to respond in the same way when he is put in the same situation. Because
Right.
you have to see, there is a pastime, but there is a focus light that the acharyas are shining, where they are telling where you need to focus, where you need to focus in this pastime. For example, someone may say that let's take the episode of Jagai and Madai thing, Nityananda Prabhu. So Jagai and Madai, they hurt Nityananda Prabhu, and cutting the long story short, they eventually got Krishna Prem. Mar kai prem de, doyal to nahi hai, right? So he got beaten up by them, but in return, he ensured that they received Krishna Prem. So this is the pastime. Okay. So now one can say that, oh, from this I understand that I understand two lessons from this. Okay. That if you hurt a Vaishnava, still a Vaishnava should give Krishna Prem. He is a Vaishnava. Okay. And the second thing is that the greater the Vaishnava whom you offend, the quicker you get Krishna Prem. Right? Because that's exactly what happened, right? It's not that Jagai and Madai had not hurt others. They had hurt others. They never got Krishna Prem. But when they hurt Nityananda Prabhu, they immediately got Krishna Prem. So this is Pratyaksha. So many times we have a wrong understanding of what is philosophical speculation. So speculating on Krishna conscious philosophy is not philosophical speculation, right? Philosophical speculation means trying to understand what the acharyas are wanting us to understand, where they are shining the light, and look at where they are shining the light and try to understand the philosophy through their eyes. That is philosophical speculation. Otherwise, it is still mental speculation, because this is the wrong conclusion. Even though you have not stated the pastime wrong, the pastime is right. The pastime is perfect, but the conclusions are wrong because it is not in line with what the acharyas want us to write. So, because in this pastime, where the acharyas are shining light, they are not shining light on the topic of how one receives Krishna Prem. Or it is not, they are not shining the light on offenses. They are shining, the light is shining, they are shining the light on the theme of the merciful nature of Nityananda Prabhu. Okay. So you are shining light there and you have your own light and you are shining it somewhere, then that is not right. So therefore, the point is we have to feel inadequate in our personal understanding, and we have to feel helplessly dependent on our own prayers, helplessly dependent on the insights given by the acharyas to actually access what pastime is actually trying to teach us. So like that, that's my understanding.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, it makes sense that we should not speculate on our own, but we should try to understand what this acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Sanatan Goswami and Jiva Goswami, what they are trying to focus on. Yeah, that's the. Okay, it makes sense, Prabhu. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to this Ajamil pastime, which you mentioned, that there are another sweet, kind of multiple layers of it.
Not just Ajamil's pastime, in all the pastimes of the Lord, there are multiple layers, but we have to gradually approach. That was the point that I was saying. That's where I was shining the light.
Yeah, but are you going to cover that after this session in upcoming sessions?
Amritanand Prabhu will cover that.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
That is long way to go. We are still in second year now.
Yeah.
But maybe sometime later.
Before that, we'll have many other sessions for sure. As Prabhu will, Prabhu willing. Like they say, Krishna willing.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
As a Prabhuji willing, we'll
Hare
have
Krishna.
multiple classes.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Damodar Hari Prabhu, you had second question?
Yes, Prabhu, I can ask this. Okay. So Prabhu, this is the follow-up. Then the second part of the discussion where you mentioned that how the universal form, understanding universal form is more straightforward compared to the past time. While we see that just not in, it's easier, I suppose it's easier to explain my question through the other parampara, like take Shri Vaishnavas or Vallabhacharya Sampradaya. There's a lot of emphasis on the more than the tattva is more on the pastime, right? And that's how they are bringing the devotees. So now when we compare what is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam and how those acharyas are approaching, how to harmonize that fact? Like in that case, I'll stop here and I'll let you explain it to me, how to harmonize it.
Well, so yes, like say for example, if you go to an Ayurvedic doctor, he will tell you that he will give you a particular medicine and he will tell you these are the things which you cannot eat. And you go to an allopathic physician, he will tell you this is the medicine, and you ask him, oh, what I can eat, cannot eat, he said, doesn't matter, you can eat anything. So and you go to a homeopathic medicine a practitioner, he will give you a medicine and you know uh, and different type of diet. So the diet may change. So someone says you cannot eat sour things, some other doctor says you can eat sour things. So is it that one is a best doctor, another is a right doctor? No. uh, they know the medicines that they are giving. Uh, they know that the medicines that they are giving, it will work with what diet, and what diet would actually counteract that medicine, right? So it's just like it's just like, you have a you cannot say that, I will take the um, homeopath's medicine because it's very sweet and easy to eat, and I will take the allopathic person's diet uh, recommendation because he's allowing me to eat everything, and I will take the Ayurvedic person's you know recommendation for taking a massage because I like taking massage. You cannot do that, right? Because particular medicine will work with particular diet patya or diet recommendation. So you cannot mix and match. So similarly, different sampradayas, even though ultimately it is prema that they are trying to inculcate, but the flavor and everything is quite different. So, and the means that they take to reach that thing may also be different. So we are dependent on our acharyas. Just like a bus ticket, if you want to go from Seattle to let's say, I don't know what is the closer city, maybe
Portland.
Portland, let's say. So Seattle to Portland. So you may have a Greyhound bus ticket, or you may have a flight ticket. Both are bona fide, right? But you may have really paid your own money to purchase that ticket. But you can't take that Greyhound ticket and hope to gain an entrance into the flight, right? Even though the ticket is bona fide, but it is not. But it cannot. They cannot allow. Or you may have the flight ticket and approach the Greyhound person, and he says, you know what, your ticket costs 20 rupees. I shelled 80 dollars to purchase this flight ticket, so you should allow me to travel. He will not allow you to travel, right? So flight ticket is bona fide, bus ticket is bona fide, as long as you board the flight with the flight ticket and bus with the bus ticket. So therefore, each acharyas in different sampradayas, they have chalked out a particular path or way to take their faithful practitioners towards the ultimate goal. Some through Greyhound, some through flight, some through train. It doesn't matter. So you may not get the same places, same this thing, and also the destination may be slightly different also. So so how the other acharyas have described, you have Veeraraghavacharya also, who has commented on the Bhagavatam, and you have Madhvacharya and Vijayadvaja Tirtha who have commented on the same Bhagavatam, and you have Vallabhacharya who has commented on same Bhagavatam. So they have also commented on these sections. So it may not be the exact commentary, but the verse cannot be changed. The same verse, the penultimate verse of the sixth canto is still there, and they have also commented on it. So, some details, some emphasis may vary from sampradaya to sampradaya, and it is bound to happen because uh, so we have to stick to what our acharyas have taught us in order to attain our goal.
Yeah, Prabhu. So the question was not on the actually sampradaya. I've heard the very detailed discussion on Mana Siksha which you had on this from Mana Siksha verses. So the question is more actually that even like let's take in our sampradaya, some Maharaj, they are more like attuned to, they give lot of pastimes. Like that's the primary for our Guru Maharaj. Like he is like always Guru Chaitanya pastime, right? So Agora pastime. While other Maharaj, they have a different mood, right? So they are all approaching within the same sampradaya. They are all approaching. Some are more emphasis on tattva, some are more emphasis on pastime. Now, if just we, if I try to take the direct understanding, like a very dumb understanding of the today's lecture, I say that, oh, Prabhu said that initial part, the tattva part is much easier than the pastime. It's very pastime hard, and then you explain it really well. Means I think somehow I understand the idea, but I'm just trying to get little more detail here, Prabhu. So I understood that, okay, rasa, to understand the rasa, you don't even have tasted that, right? So now when Maharaj are trying to speak to an audience, in a big audience, right? And the audience may not even know tattva, and they are coming with the pastime. So is it, so my understanding, so now I'll make the question shorter. My understanding is that because it is coming through the elevated devotee, right? They know how to put it together, and they, when they are speaking, so the audience can understand, right? Even if it is a pastime, they can understand through that, right? But if somebody reads it, right? So is it always that one has to first understand the tattva and then try to go through the pastime, or somebody can go and see the read the pastime and then they come to the tattva, or is there any
It all depends on the teacher, bro. It all depends on the teacher. So the one who has taken the role of teaching, he knows, as long as he knows what he is capable of giving and how he is capable of giving, and the nature of his audience, you know, he can take a course, because as long as he knows what, from what level to what level the audience need to be raised. So he can, as long as he has a clear-cut understanding and he is bona fide and he is spiritually empowered, he can chalk out his way of accomplishing it. Like there could be teachers, like someone, you're homeschooling your child. If you are a capable teacher, when you're teaching your child, in one sitting, you may be so good that you may teach mathematics and English and some other thing also in one way, by very nicely, sort of putting them together in a very innovative way. In one session, the child does not even understand whether I'm attending a maths class or a English class or a science class, whatever. But if you are capable enough, you can do it like that. So there is no hard and fast rule. And even when the and for what purpose they are doing, whether they are sharing the pastime, one person may a person at the beginner's level, it may create in him an appetite to understand the Shastras, whereas a more elevated person may actually access the real depth of that Shastra. So it may have different effect on different people. So advanced devotees, this comes from spiritual maturity. So they can accomplish with one narration, it can have multiple effect on different people. So, but we may not be able to do it. We may just be one trick pony, we may have one class of people to whom we may be able to make them understand a particular point, like that. But more elevated devotees, sometimes just by their mere presence, without speaking anything also, they can create very deep impact. So yeah, this is not very stereotyped actually. This is
thank you,
very
Prabhu.
dynamic.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you. Very helpful.
Right.
Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Shall we move ahead to the fifth point, Prabhu, or what is there
Yes,
something?
I had like one quick question, and
Yes, Prabhu.
the question is like we hear about Paramatma realization, the yogis meditating on
Mhm.
Paramatma in the heart. So when they, because you brought up that point, so that's where my question arises, that when they realize Paramatma, they see the Paramatma form in the heart.
Mhm.
So are they realizing the same Paramatma as a Paramatma feature which has been described in Srimad Bhagavatam?
Yeah, that is why the description of the Paramatma form is there in the second canto. So therefore, the word that is specifically used is Dharanashraya, the object of meditation. So the description is given, and the acharyas say this particular description is there so that the yogi knows which form to meditate upon.
Right.
So
So that's a form. But however, can we compare that form with the form of Paramatma, which is the three different forms?
oh yeah, so the form the form of Paramatma that we meditate. So even though all three are Paramatma tattvas, like Kshirodakasaya Vishnu is the Paramatma in the individual living entity's heart. Garbhodakasaya Vishnu is the Paramatma of individual universes, and Karanodakasaya Vishnu is the Paramatma of the whole material nature. So, but the yogi is trying to meditate on the Paramatma within his heart. So, for him, he will see the form of Kshirodakasaya Vishnu. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Now we can.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we have discussed the fourth reason why these topics appear. The fifth reason that we are going to see now is that any Mahapuran has to discuss these 10 topics. We know that there are 18 Mahapuranas. So any of the Mahapurana should have these 10 topics. So what are these 10 topics of all Mahapuranas? Atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshanam mutayah manvantareshanukata nirodho muktir ashraya. So these are the 10 topics. Okay. So sarga is primary creation. I'm not going to go into detail of these 10 things, even though I have it as a part of my presentation. Uh, uh, but still, I will not go into detail because that's not the purpose of this whole presentation. It's just to understand why we have so many other different topics. Why can't it just be a description of Krishna's pastimes, right? So atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshana mutaya manvantareshanukata nirodho muktirashraya. So in this Purana, there are 10 topics, atra, but of course we do understand that it's there in all the Puranas, Mahapuranas. Creation, so I will first say what is just the words and then we will see the meaning of them. Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, Uti, Manvantara, Ishanukata, Nirodho, Mukti, Ashraya. These are the 10 topics. So, but the 10th topic is actually Ashraya. Ashraya means the ultimate shelter of all the other 9 topics. That is Krishna. Okay. Even though the 10 topics are there in all the Puranas, what is the specialty of Srimad Bhagavatam is mentioned in the next verse. Dashamasya Vishyartam Navanam Iha Lakshanam Varnayanti Mahatmanah Shrutena Artena Cha Anjasa. So he says, Mahatmanah, great devotees such as Vidura and Maitreya, Anjasa Varnayanti, they properly describe Navanam Iha Lakshanam, these other 9 topics. The first 9 topics, Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, Muti, Manvantara, Ishanukata, Nirodho, Nirodha, Mukti. These 9 topics. Dashamasya Vishuddhyartham, in order to impart the highest knowledge of the 10th topic. Okay. The purpose of the description of the 9 topics is so that we perfectly understand the 10th topic. In Bhagavatam, these 9 topics are scientifically and sequentially presented in such a way that when we go through these 9 topics, then we have a very organically, very proper kind of mood to approach the 10th topic of Ashraya. And how they do? Shrutena cha artena. Through the words of the scripture and through stories to illustrate their meaning, they describe these other 9 topics so that the 10th topic can be perfectly understood. So this is the exclusive specialty of Srimad Bhagavatam, that this purpose of illuminating the 10th topic perfectly is completely consistent right from the first syllable of the first verse till the last syllable of the last verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. But this kind of consistency is not there in the other Puranas. Sometimes the other 9 topics can be described in the other Puranas or other literatures without sticking to this purpose of illuminating the 10th topic, right? So, but in Srimad Bhagavatam, the other 9 topics are discussed for the sole purpose of illuminating the 10th topic, to impart the highest knowledge of the 10th topic. Like, say, for example, in your Seattle temple, who are the deities? Who are their lordships?
Shri Radha Nil Madhava.
Shri Radha Nil Madhav. So Shri Radha Nil Madhav are standing on the altar, willing to give you their darshan, their kind darshan. And let's say on the altar, those who have designed the altar, you might know, those who are taking darshan, they may not consciously notice. There must be focus lights placed at various places, strategic places, one will be shining on the lotus face of Nil Madhav, another will be shining on the lotus face of Srimati Radharani, another will be shining on the navel part, another will be shining on the lotus feet. Like that, at strategic positions, there will be focus lights placed, right? Is the beauty of Radha Nil Madhav dependent on these focus lights? No. If the focus lights are not there, can we appreciate the beauty of Radha Nil Madhav with our gross vision? We cannot. So the 10th topic of Krishna is not dependent on the 9 topics. Krishna is independent. In fact, the other 9 topics are dependent on Krishna, right? So Krishna is independent, just like the beauty of Nila Madhav is not dependent on the strategic position of the focus lights. But for the person who is taking darshan, the focus lights are as important, or they are definitely important. It may not be as important, but they are definitely important, because if they are not shining properly, then we will not be able to appreciate the beauty of Shri Radha Nila Madhav, right? So in Bhagavatam, the other 9 topics are described. They are like the focus lights, the 9 focus lights which are there in the altar of Shri Radha Nil Madhav at strategic positions. So when they shine, one who is trying to relish and appreciate the beauty of Radha Nil Madhav can perfectly relish it and perfectly appreciate it. But Radha Nil Madhav's beauty is not dependent on the focus light. They are independent. In fact, the focus lights have no utility if one day Shri Radha Nil Madhav choose to take a walk outside the altar, right? The focus lights have no utility. No one will switch on the focus lights on the altar, right? But when Radha Nil Madhav are standing, they have all the utility, especially for the person who is taking darshan of their lordships. So similarly, in Bhagavatam, this is so consistent. This principle is so consistent that whenever the other 9 topics are discussed, they are discussed with the sole purpose of very scientifically and sequentially creating the right attitude to appreciate the 10th topic of Krishna's pastimes, Ashraya. But this is not so consistent in the other Puranas, right? So now I will not spend time discussing what are these 10 topics because it will be a diversion and we are already running short of time. Okay. So these 10 topics are creation, primary creation, secondary creation, the universal cosmology, the universal structure, how it looks like, atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshanam, how the Lord nourishes his devotees. Uti. Uti means impressions which inspire action. Utaya karma vasana, right? How, we have particular impressions, like as soon as we look at a piece of rasgulla, immediately our tongue starts salivating. Why? Because we have had a past experience of eating rasgulla and relishing it. So therefore, it inspires particular involuntary reaction in our body, and at the same time, we may immediately start walking towards that rasgulla, pick up that rasgulla and pop it in our mouth. So how impressions inspire action? That is a very important topic that is discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam, especially in the 7th canto, which is called as Uti, where how divine impressions can inspire divine actions is described through the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj, and how demoniac impressions can inspire demoniac actions is described to the activities of Hiranyakashipu. So this is Uti. Then there are Manvantara, how the Manus and the Manvantara avatars, how they engage in universal management, like that. There are the other 9 topics. These 9 topics are there in Bhagavatam for the sole purpose of illuminating the right understanding and right appreciation of the 10th topic. I will not go through the the meaning of these 9, but then then I'll come here. Bhagavatam itself says this, that this consistency of purpose of always whatever, that's why Srila Jiva Goswami says every single syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for glorifying Krishna, nothing otherwise. But you may see some other descriptions of but they are all meant to glorify Krishna. It's just like, but you may say, but this is not actually glorifying Krishna. This is actually describing the universal form. So it's just like if I have to, if someone has to recommend, let's say if someone wants to go and pursue his PhD in the same university, and I want to recommend him to my professor. So I have to tell him he's a very good student and he has passed from IIT Hawaii. So now my professor in the United States, he may not know what is IIT Powai. So I may have to say, I may have to describe IIT Powai, what kind of an institution it is, right? Oh, these IITs are very premier institutes, and what is the selection procedure? How rigorous is the selection procedure, and those who pass out of IIT, how they get situated. So it might be, so one might be wondering, you went to your professor to recommend the student, but instead of talking about the student, you're talking about IIT. So are you trying to create an impression in that professor about IIT or the student? Ultimately student only, but in describing that IIT, will help create the proper impression about that student to my professor, right? So I know the purpose and I know what I am trying to accomplish. So even though an immediate look at it or a superficial look at it may seem like I am glorifying IIT, but deep inside, that glorification of IIT has something to do with creating a proper appreciation for that particular friend of mine. So similarly, Bhagavatam is very consistent with its purpose. What it's doing, Bhagavatam exactly knows why it's doing what it's doing. The purpose is very clear. We may not be able to understand how this particular verse is going to help me develop Krishna Prem. We may not understand. We don't have to. Because if we lack that devotional maturity, we cannot prematurely understand it also. So it's perfectly fine if we don't understand, but we should have trust in Srimad Bhagavatam, trust in the speakers of Srimad Bhagavatam, that they know what they are doing. So here, Bhagavatam itself says in the 12th canto, Kalimala samhati kalano akilesho harir itaratra na giyate hi abhikshnam. Iha tu punar bhagavan asheshamurti paripatito anupadam katha prasangaihi. He says, Harihi Akila Ishaha. Lord Narayana, the soul of the universal form, Kali Mala Samhati Kalana, who annihilates the accumulated sins of the age of Kali, Itaratra. Itaratra means in other books other than Srimad Bhagavatam, Na Hi Abhikshnam Giyate. Abhikshnam means constantly. He is not constantly glorified in other works other than Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? Two, but when would you start a sentence with the word but? What does it do? The word but, when you start a sentence with the word but, what does it do? Why do you use the word but? Can someone share?
Prabhuji, to contradict what has been said earlier.
Yeah, to create a contrast. To create a contrast, or you can sometimes it may even be contradiction, but to create a contrast. Iha tu, but here in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord, Ashesha Murti, with unlimited forms, Punaha means again and again, abundantly and constantly, Anupadam, in every single syllable, Paripatito, it is described. Katha Prasangai, on the pretext of giving various narrations, it is actually Bhagavan who is glorified in every syllable. How, you do not know. You may not know. So now, if you want to go from your house in Seattle to Portland, so Portland is in which direction from Seattle? Is it east, west, north, south, or is it southeast, what is? Which direction?
Southern direction.
Southern direction, right? So from your house where you are sitting, from the room in which you are sitting, if you get up and start walking in the southern direction, will you reach Portland?
Reach a wall.
You will reach a wall. That's exactly. So the door to your house where you're sitting right now, the door to your room may be in the northern direction. So in order to go to Portland, which is in the southern direction, you may first have to walk in the northern direction, which is actually in the opposite direction to where Portland is. But that is necessary because otherwise you will not get out of your room only. So one who is actually giving these directions, he knows that to ultimately reach the southern direction, you may have to sometime move in the northern direction, sometimes go in the southeast direction, sometimes in the northwest direction, and then go through these various roads and eventually reach. But ultimately, the person who is guiding knows that the destination is in the southern direction. So we have to know, we have to have trust in the person who is writing. Every single moment you cannot say, but you said Portland is in the southern direction, but now you are asking me to move in the north. But you said Portland is in the southern direction, now you are asking me to move in the eastern direction. That's fine. You just follow what I'm telling, right? So that's what he will tell. So similarly, Bhagavatam is very consistent in its purpose, but that consistent purpose may not be immediately evident to us in every single word, but that is fine. But the Acharyas, the 6 Goswamis have figured it out. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipunau Sadharma Samstapakau. They know, they have figured it out all. So they have understood the scriptures and they know how they accomplish it. We may not know, we just have to have trust. Certain things will start with trust and the enlightenment will come later, like that. And even this consistency of purpose is described by Vidura also to Maitreya in the 3rd canto. So if you see, Vidura is the son of, who is the father of Vidura? Vyasadeva, right? So Vyasadeva is the father of Vidura, and Maitreya is the classmate of Vyasadeva. Both of them learned from Parashar Muni. But Vyasadeva is certainly more accomplished or well known, especially as the compiler of the magnum opus creation, Mahabharata. So Maitreya may ask this question: you are the son of Vyasadeva, who is much more accomplished than me, and you have come to me, searching me, to hear Krishna Katha from me? Sounds very strange. I have not compiled anything like Mahabharata that your father has compiled. So Maitreya says, Vidura says here in this verse, he says, Paravaresham Bhagavan Vratani Shrutani me Vyasa Mukadavikshnam Atrupnamak Shulla Sukavahanam Tesham Rite Krishna Katamritogat. He says, O Bhagavan, O great Maitreya, Shrutani me Abhikshnam. I have repeatedly heard. From whom? Vyasa Mukha, from the mouth of my father Vyasadeva. What have you heard? Paravaresham Vratani. Vratani means the activities and intentions of Paresha and Avaresha. Paresha means very pious people like the Pandavas, and Avaresha means impious people like the Kauravas. I have heard many times. Piety, what is dharma, what is adharma, what is dharma, what is adharma, what is dharmic activity, what is adharmic activity. I have heard. Tesham atrupnuma, but now I am no longer satisfied with that. Why? Kshulla sukavahanam, because it gave me very insignificant happiness. Why did it give you very insignificant happiness? Rite, because it was without Krishna Katamrita Oghat, because it was devoid of the great sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. The purpose was not very consistent. There was a lot of description of dharma, 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 but there was no consistent glorification of Krishna. I want to hear a literature which is consistent with, and later Vyasadeva says, look, tell me Krishna Katha or something that will help me develop appreciation for Krishna Katha. That's what you should speak, he says. So Srila Prabhupada, commenting on this verse, we will read Srila Prabhupada's purport and then I think we will pause there, because the rest of the presentation is a continuation of some other presentation. So I think we will end here because time is also up. He says, Srila Prabhupada writes, Vidura explained to Maitreya his position of being fully satiated with the knowledge of mundane, social and political topics and having no more interest in them. Even though Mahabharata is there, but there is no consistent glorification. Some sarga, some visarga is there in Mahabharata also, but it is not necessarily connected to Krishna. He was anxious to hear transcendental topics regarding Lord Shri Krishna. because there were insufficient topics directly concerning Krishna in Puranas, Mahabharata, etc. He was not satisfied and he wanted to know more about Krishna. Vidura wanted to hear of everything from Maitreya, and so he inquired from him. But he desired that all the topics be in relationship with Krishna. This was a condition that Vidura put to Maitreya. Speak anything, but connect everything to Krishna. All roads that you take should go to Krishna. Okay. As fire is never satisfied in its consumption of firewood, so a pure devotee of the Lord never hears enough about Krishna. Historical events and other narrations concerning social and political incidents all become transcendental as soon as they are in relationship with Krishna. Therefore, there are historical events and narrations concerning some social political events briefly mentioned in Bhagavatam, but after hearing the whole thing, unconsciously it will enhance our appreciation for Krishna. That is how it is designed in Srimad Bhagavatam. That way to transform mundane things into spiritual identity. The whole world can be transformed into Vaikuntha if all worldly activities are dovetailed with Krishna Katha. And that is the way in which Srimad Bhagavatam is written. That's why Brahmaji, when speaking to Narada Muni, he says, what I have spoken to you, my dear Narada, he says is, Idam Bhagavatam Nama Yenme Bhagavatoditam Sangrahoyam Vibhutinam Tvametad Vipulikuru. This work called Bhagavatam, spoken to me by the Lord, is a collection of the Lord's vibhutis. You should distribute it everywhere. And how you should distribute it? He says, Yata harau bhagavati nrinam bhaktir bhavishyati sarvatmanyakhiladare iti sankalpya varnaya. Take a sankalpa, my dear Narada. Take a vow of describing Bhagavatam to so many people. This month I will describe Bhagavatam to so many people. Like that you take a sankalpa, but describe it in such a way, Yata bhaktihi harau, so that devotion to Lord Hari Nrinam Bhavishyati will appear in the people of Kali Yuga. Because your narration should match with the purpose of the literature. The purpose of the literature is to enhance, every single syllable is to enhance one's devotion towards Lord Hari. Right? So therefore, the way you narrate it should align itself with the purpose of the literature. So describe Bhagavatam in such a way that the purpose of Bhagavatam, which is to enhance devotion towards Lord Hari, is accomplished. Like that. So every single syllable of Bhagavatam, even though the 10 topics are there, the 10 topics are very strategically put in such a way that it perfectly creates an appreciation for the 10th topic of Ashraya. Like that. So therefore, when we understand why these topics are there at a particular place and all that, then it will definitely help us develop the proper kind of appreciation for these topics. We will take them with due respect, with proper eagerness and appreciation, so that it can create the right kind of transformation in our heart, as as Shukadeva Goswami mentioned. It will create the right kind of Shraddha, Bhakti and Vishuddha Buddhi, so that we can understand the subsequent topics in the right perspective. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Amritanand Prabhu, for sharing these topics. It was a very wonderful experience interacting with the devotees. So thank you very much.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking us into a different platform. Are you able to hear me? Hari Bol.
Yes, Prabhu, we can hear
Yes,
you.
Prabhu, we can hear you.
So Prabhu, I really appreciate. I think some light has gone. Looks like Prabhu's screen is completely dark. No electricity. Balaram Shakti Prabhu, are you able to hear? Yeah, I think it's completely dark there in India. Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhu, for taking time from your busy schedule. I know your schedule is really, really busy. However, you make sure to spend like at least a couple of hours with all of us. And I have learned a lot from these sessions. In particular, I don't know what the others devotees, what is their experience, but my experience is the way Prabhuji presented the verses. I always felt a disconnect from the verses and the translation made by Srila Prabhupada. But the way Prabhuji presented this session, in which one thing I learned was how those Sanskrit terms he incorporated with the English. That made the Sanskrit terms more relatable. So Prabhu is, I think, is joining back. Let me just wait for Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Here's my function. So I just connected it to my phone hotspot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think now your voice was last few words were good. Otherwise, it was.
Yeah, I just switched off my video because my the internet connection is bandwidth is low. So can you hear me now, Prabhu?
Yes, I can hear you. I think all of us can hear you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Prabhu, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I can't thank you enough for spending time with us. I mean, your schedule is really, really tight. However, you spend like 4 hours, more than 4 hours with us. And the things I learned, I was just expressing to the devotees over here, that the way you presented the Sanskrit terms, the Sanskrit of Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as the translation, there was always, I felt a disconnect. But the way you presented in the connecting the English translation with this Sanskrit, word by word, that really helped me, and I think I should incorporate in my study as well as preaching, which helps to connect the verse with the translation, the meanings. Second thing I learned is, you are not taking any shortcuts. Going deep into the subject matters, you're not in a hurry to complete. A lot of time we have that mindset that I want to complete the things, but I think going deeper is more important. I personally feel that way than trying to complete that I have completed like one chapter or two chapter or entire canto of Bhagavatam. But going deeper and understanding the subject matter feels more important. So that's the part I relished very much. Of course, the content was very high level. So I have to revisit these classes to understand it one more time, at least. So these are some of my thoughts. However, other devotees can express their point of view. So thank you again. And looking
Thank you,
forward
bro.
to
Thank you very much.
continue this journey. This is just a beginning.
Yes, bro. Definitely. Whenever we have mutual convenience at a mutually convenient time, yeah, we can do. Thank you, bro. I need to rush right now. So if it's
Yes, sir. So
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
let's chant Hari Bol thrice. Appreciate our thanks to Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol. Hari Bol.
Hari.
Thank you. Hari.
Thank you, bro.
Hari Bol.
Thank you, Rajaraman Prabhu, for conducting all these things, making sure that everything works nicely. Thank you so much.